Peace to the 12. Y'all see the title, man. Black Americans Before Slavery. I don't know if I'm going to title this Native Black Americans Before Slavery or whatever. But yeah, the title is exactly what it says, okay? And I done touched on this topic before, but really this is just me adding some extra documentation of people, like people that are anthropologists and archaeologists and historians that attest to the fact that, yes, in fact, there were so-called black people in the Americas prior to Columbus, okay? And let me say this before I go any further. I've said this a billion times. I had someone ask me a question. So you're saying that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen? That's not what I'm saying. Yes, it did happen. It's documented. What I'm saying to you is what I've been saying for years at this point, which is that the so-called blacks of the Western Hemisphere come from three major groups. That being the natives that were already here, all right, the natives that were already in the Americas, also the ones that were deported from Europe, the black Europeans, and the ones that came from the west and central coast of Africa. Okay? So I just wanted to get all that in there before I even go any further. But anyway, without further ado, let's get a scripture and get right into this. So let's go to Psalms 85 and 11. All right, truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. All right, truth springs up out of the earth through documentation, artifacts, skeletal remains, paintings, pictures, so on and so forth. Now, the first guy we're going to be looking into is somebody I don't think I've used on this channel yet, which was, I believe he was a historian. It's written in Spanish, but I translated for you brothers because I know probably a lot of you can't speak Spanish. But this is a guy by the name of Carlos Cuervo Marquez. All right, he was born in 1858. Now let's get the translated version. Carlos Cuervo Marquez was born in Bogota, August 2nd, 1858, in Mexico City. All right, and he died in 1930. So another guy born in the 1800s. All right, he was a polymath scientist, a politician, a diplomat, military man, and a Colombian historian, and a member of the Colombian Conservative Party. Cuervo stood out in different fields of knowledge. He was a botanist, historian, anthropologist, and ethnologist. Placed a significant interest in Meso and South American indigenous cultures such as the Mayans and the Chipkas. As a politician, yeah, we don't care about the political part. But anyway, so that's his credentials: historian, anthropologist, ethnologist. Okay, so he had a body of work written in the form of a book known as Estudios Arqueológicos y Etnográficos, which translates to archaeological and ethnographical studies. All right, this is his work. We're going to go into this. And the whole book is written in Spanish, but I went ahead and Google translated it for you people. So you welcome. But anyway, we're just going to go to highlighted portions for sake of time. You guys can read the whole thing if you want to. You know, actually, matter of fact, I'll read this part too. In the corresponding description, we have already noted that in the statues, figures 13 and 14, very ancient in appearance, and represented it with singular attributes, the characteristic features of the Negroid type. All right, the characteristic features of the Negroid type are faithfully reproduced. Significant fact that is not unique in America, and that is represented in the oldest Mexican sculptures, such as in the large diortic head of Yahawashi and the gigantic axe of Veracruz, with which above all it presents great analogies. One of the statues mentioned, right? Do these two concordant facts mean that in ancient times America was it occupied by black people? So this is the question that he's posing. All right, based off of his findings, he's saying, so was America occupied in its ancient times by so-called black people? All right, so let's keep reading on. This I'm gonna read this part. Let's go ahead and get this too. This hypothesis is corroborated by the fact that the conquistadors found small tribes scattered throughout the entire length of the New World who were from the first moment considered black. You see that? So conquistadors found small tribes scattered throughout the entire length of the New World who would be considered black. Okay, so-called black people. Okay. American towns, some tribes of Darien, they say that when their ancestors first arrived in that region, it was occupied by small black men who then they retreated to the forests, and the Payas and Tapalases of the Kunakunas traced their origin to a man and two women, an Indian and another black, who lived on the banks of the Tartacuna. To this race, without a doubt, the ancient skeletons of very different structure from those of the American red race that in various. Okay, so there were skeletal remains that were contradictory to the so-called red Indian. Okay, so he's letting you know that there were so-called black people here. And you know, as I make these videos historically, I am well aware that there will be people, it doesn't matter what documentation you bring out, it doesn't matter what facts you bring out, they're going to make a dumbass comment. I'm aware of that. You know, and I applaud you guys who make your dumbass comments, because what a comment does is give me more into the algorithm so more people can view this history. So go ahead and make your stupid ass comments. But anyway, reading on page 272, this part, it is possible then, we repeat, that in ancient times, now let's read this again. It is possible then, we repeat, that in ancient times the young America was also a black continent, and that the Otomi of Mexico, the Caracos of Haiti, the Arguellos of Cutara, the Aravos of the Orinoco, the Poracihis, and the Matayas of Brazil, and the Banabis of Quito, the Chawanas of Darien, and the Albinos of Panama are the remains of the indigenous Negroid race on which the so-called red or American race was later formed. So we just mentioned a boatload of tribes in different parts: Mexico, Haiti, Brazil, Quito, Panama, of so-called Negroid race that was here. Okay. But anyway, let's go to the next guy. All right, next guy, next book. Francisco Lopez de Gomara. He was a Spanish historian, born in 1511. So this man's old as hell. All right, born in 1511, died in 1566. Let's see what he had to say in his body of work, Historia General de las Indias. Okay. Which probably translates to what? History General on the Indians, right? Anyway, so let's see what he had to say. Once again, it was all written in Spanish, but I translated it for you guys. How there are many other islands and lands in the roundness of the world without those we have named, one of which is the land of the Strait of Magellan, which answers to the east, in which, according to its sample, it is very large and very close to the Antarctic Pole. They think that on the one hand it goes towards the Cape of Good Hope, and on the other towards the Moluccos, those of the ships of the Viceroy Don Antonio de Mendoza found a land of blacks. Okay, so he found a land of blacks. Now the Strait of Magellan is in the region of Chile. I looked it up. Okay. Strait of Magellan. All right, and Antonio de Mendoza, the guy he quoted who found a land of blacks, he was a viceroy of New Spain, born in 1535, died in 1550. He did not live very long. Damn. Oh no, that's how long he was in office. I don't know when he died, but anyway, reading on. It's kind of hard to read, but I'm gonna go down to They had picked him up before fighting. However, he found some black slaves of the lord. He asked where they came from, and they couldn't tell him or understand anything that there were men from that country, color near there, in whom they had a very ordinary war. These were the first blacks seen in the Indies, and even, I think, they have not been seen again. Balboa rounded up 50 Puitos that he found there and then burned them. infirm first year. Okay. And he mentioned Balboa. Balboa, I've mentioned him before on this channel. Vasco Nunez de Balboa was born in 1475. He was like one of the first Spanish explorers. He was conquistador. But anyway, reading on. Page 144. I love that number. It states, same book, which is what is it? Historia General de las Indias. Same book. This is page 144. They are the Indians of Darien and the entire coast of the Gulf of Yoruba and Nombre da Dios of color between fawn and yellow. Although, as I said, blacks, like from Guyana, were found in Cuareca. Alright? They had good height, few beards, and heads and hair outside the head. Alright? So once again, he says blacks, like from Guyana. Alright? I think that's how you pronounce it, or Guinea, were found in Cuareca. Alright? And Guinea, or Guyane, or Guyana, I don't know how you pronounce it, Salakia for that. But it's in West Africa. So he says there are people that look like West Africans that were already there in the region of Cuareca. Now, Cuareca is a place, or Curaçao, is a part of the continental shelf of South America, in the region by Trinidad and Tobago, kinda. All right, this is Curacao. All right, and the continental shelf of South America is in the the Pentagon, sometimes referred to as the Argentine Shelf, is part of the South American continental shelf belonging to the Argentine Sea on the Atlantic seaboard south of about 35 degrees south. It adjoins the coast of Uruguay, Argentina, and the Falkland Islands. Okay? Just for reference to that. Reading on. How far are we into this video? We're making good time. Page 193, same book. It states, our Spaniards invited them to the ships, and they ours to his house. In short, 7 Harke but Bessiers went 2 leagues and land to a leather tiled square in the middle, a thick forest which was divided into 2 rooms, one for men and another for women and children. 5 lived there, giants, and 13 women and boys, all blacker than it requires the coldness of that land. So they were all black in complexion. Okay? And they were giants. Probably look like Shaq, you know, or some NBA player or whatever. Anyway, next book, Roland Burge Dixon. Now, if you brothers watch my Vikings Behind the Curtain video, you would be familiar with this guy. I used him in that video. We're going to quote from the same book that he had, which I believe it was titled Ancient Races of Men or something like that. Anyway, this is Roland Burge Dixon. He was an American anthropologist born in 1875. All right, he was an American anthropologist. He wrote a book titled The Racial History of Man. We're going to go to page 400, where he talks about North America. We're going to go through the highlighted portions for sake of time, as always, right? Let me get a drink of water. All right, so the Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid types are also peripheral, occurring in the largest proportion along or near the Pacific coast and in the region of the east of the Great Lakes. Now, the region east of the Great Lakes would be in this region over here, this region and eastward. All right, the region east of the Great Lakes includes part of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ontario, and Quebec. I pointed this way, my bad. East is this way. All right, this is west side. So east would be this way, and in parts of Canada. East of the Great Lakes. And what did he say? Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid types found all throughout that region. So when we go through here, he says, the reader has doubtless stared with surprise, not unmixed with horror, at the audacity of the statement of the Mediterranean and Caspian. So people would still be like, what are you talking about? There were no Australoids and Negroids. You know, just like today. Anyway, he says, Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid types were to be found among the American Indians. That these types were widely distributed in the old world, or at least in parts of it, he would be willing to grant. That they had extended even onto the island area of the Pacific, he may somewhat grudgingly admit. Alright? But that it should be suggested that they were to be found in the New World is an idea so completely at variance with traditional and current theories that he would be inclined to regard the statement as utterly absurd. The suggestion that so once again, that's his doubt creeping in. The suggestion that Mediterranean or Proto-Negroid types, for example, are to be found in America is indeed revolutionary. And also, I have a study that was, I think, performed in 2005, where they pretty much agree with these findings from back in the 1800s. All right, and yet not quite so preposterous as it may seem at first sight, if it be only kept in mind that the statement does not mean that actual Negroes or peoples from the Mediterranean shores are supposed to have migrated to the New World. All right, so he's saying actual Negroes, whatever that means. I guess he's trying to say that these are people with Negroid features that weren't Negroes or whatever. Doesn't really matter. But notice he said Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid types. This is an Australoid woman. This is a so-called African woman. Now, this is the research. I pulled this before, by the way. This is the research I'm stating that goes with the statements about the Australoid and so-called African type that was found in South America. Now, this is from a PNAS study. Okay, this is from the National Academy of Science. All right, now before I go any further, look, is the National Academy of Science credible? Google. Our reports are viewed as valuable and credible because of the institution's reputation for proving independent, objective, and nonpartisan advice with high standards of scientific and technical quality. All right, so yes, they are credible. Now let's see what this article has to say. Let's see what this research paper has to state. So this is from the National Academy of Science in 2005, December 20th. It states, cranial morphology of early Americans from Lago Santa, Brazil, implications for the settlement of the New World. All right, now watch this. Abstract. The earliest South Americans, check that out, the earliest South Americans tend to be more similar to present Australians, Melanesians, and sub-Saharan Africans. All right, Australians or Africans. All right. The results obtained from all multivariate analysis confirm a close morphological affinity between South American Paleo-Indians and extant Austro-Melanesian groups, supporting the hypothesis that two distinct biological populations could have colonized the New World in the Pleistocene-Holocene transition. All right. Now keep in mind, he said the earliest South Americans tend to be Australoid, Melanesian, or Sub-Saharan African. Read it on. And even when you research about so-called Afro-Mexicans, what do they say? Now, mind you, it said what? Sub-Saharan Africans. All right, early South Americans. Now, when you look up Afro-Mexicans on Google, it'll say Afro-Mexicans, also known as Black Mexicans, are Mexicans who have heritage from Sub-Saharan Africa and identify as such. All right. So keep that in mind. Sub-Saharan African, Sub-Saharan. All right. So-called Sub-Saharan Africans, Afro-Mexicans. Reading down the same study. These are mainly Australian and African samples, although some Polynesian, Guam, and North Maori are in American series. Eskimo and base can be found in the extremity of Lago Santa's 95% confidence dispersion. Okay. Shows that the majority of the series within the Paleo-Indian dispersion are Austro-Melanesians and Africans. All right, this is dealing with the bones they found. Okay. Well, let's get another study. This is a nature study. It says genetic evidence for two founding populations of the Americas. Okay. Here we analyze genome-wide data to show that some Amazonian Native Americans descend partly from Native American founded populations that carried ancestry more closely related to indigenous Australians, New Guineans, and Andaman Islanders than to any present-day Eurasians or Native Americans. Okay? And these are Aboriginal Australians once again. what was I saying? Salakia. Discussion and conclusions. Where do I want to start at? The three different quantitative analyses undertaken in this study demonstrate that the first South Americans exhibit a cranial morphology that is very different from late and modern northeastern Asians and Amerindians. Hold on. And relatively high and narrow orbits noses, but very similar to present Australians, Melanesians, and Africans. So the first South Americans in this study are very similar to Australians, Melanesians, and Africans. Go down to here. The phenomenon cannot as well be said to represent the result of microevolutionary processes restricted in Logosantana, because the same cranial pattern has already been described in places as distant as ecologically southern Chile, we talked about Chile earlier, Colombia, Sabana de Bogota, Mexico, Mexico Basin, Baja California, United States, Florida, and elsewhere in Brazil and Sao Paulo. Okay? So anyway, back to the book. I just wanted to show you this little science study that was quantifying what he was stating in this book back in the 1800s, or back in 1923. That's when it was published. Back to the book, which is The Racial History of Man by Ronald B. Dixon. Let's go back on track. Page 401. Has been pointed out in the introductory chapter, the type which, for example, the name of Proto-Negroid has been given carries with it no implication in regard to skin color. Yeah, that was back to what I was saying. He's trying to state that maybe they didn't have the skin, but they had the skulls and all that, right? Has been given carries no implication in regard to skin color, hair form, or any other superficial or structural features which may be found in the modern Negro. The statement that certain crania from North America are of a Proto-Negroid type means nothing more than that insofar as three factors of cephalic index, length height index, and nasal index are concerned, these crania similar to crania of African, Southern Asiatic, or Oceanic Negroid peoples. Alright. So he's basically giving somebody a way out who would disagree. Maybe the skulls just resemble Negroes, but they're non-Negroes, is what he's basically saying. Now, based on that science we just got earlier, they also said they were similar to Australians or Negroids, and so on and so forth. But later on in this book, he's about to continue to mention this topic anyway. Although the evidence is still rather contradictory as to the relative priority of the broad-nosed and narrow-nosed long-headed types, it seems on the whole probably, that the Proto-Australoid must have been one of the earliest, if not the earliest type to spread into the North American continent. On the Pacific coast of California and Lower California, it appears to be constitute the oldest stratum, characterizing as it does the crania from the lower layers of the shelf heaps from the islands of Santa Carolina and San Clemente of the coast, and from the extinct. So he's saying that it's probable, meaning most likely, that the earliest inhabitants of North America were the Australians, or were the Australoid type, and or Negroid type, which we got in this PNAS study review, the National Academy of Science from 2005. They agree with him on that statement. All right, these are different skulls: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Capoid, Congoid, Australoid, and really, to me, these skull patterns are dated, considering the intermixture that happens between different so-called races. But that's another video for another day. But nonetheless, continuing on the book, page 409, even though it looks like 400, it's 409, The Racial History of Man by Ronald B. Dixon. Highlighted portion, which states, in contrast with these more easterly Algonquian tribes, our knowledge of those of New England is wholly derived from crania, since the pureblood Indian of the greater portion of this area has been long extinct. So according to him, the pureblood Indian is extinct. The larger number of the crania are from sites in the central and eastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and show on analysis that the dominant element in all this area is most unexpectedly Proto-Negroid. So all the craniums, the skulls they found in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, were of a Negroid type. Okay? Now, keep that in mind, specifically Massachusetts, because I want to go back to a bomb that you learn about in history. Not a bomb, but I'm going to drop a bomb that you learn on history. At first thought, such a suggestion seems impossible. So he's saying now the thought of having Negro skulls in Massachusetts and Rhode Island seems impossible. Yet, on the basis of the criteria here adopted, the fact cannot be denied. So the fact is undeniable. All right, unable to be denied or disputed, indisputable, indubitable, unquestionable, beyond doubt, beyond question. So it cannot be denied. And as the crania are, with a few exceptions, almost certainly pre-European or from the period of the earliest contact, no possibility of historic Negro mixture is admissible. So he's saying they weren't even mixed at this point in time. So he said proto-Negro people of Massachusetts. Now, Boston is in Massachusetts, for those that you know. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, specifically you people on the east side. So Boston is in Massachusetts, right? Well, historically, I know you've heard of the Boston Tea Party. Well, see, now it makes sense why in the Boston Tea Party, these people put on blackface to pretend to be quote-unquote Indians, when they were allegedly dumping tea in the harbor. Okay? This is on the History Channel, the History page. The Sons of Liberty famous masqueraded in Native American dress on the night of the Tea Party raid, complete with tomahawks and faces darkened with coal soot. Faces darkened with coal soot. This is what it looks like when you darken your face with coal soot. All right, it's called. They're put on blackface. Okay, mind you, this is the Boston Tea Party. Not likely, says Carp. It was customary in 18th century England for protesters to cross-dress in one way or another. Yeah, Esau still cross-dressing, pushing that movement even back then. Blackening their faces, dressing as women, or even Catholic priests to create an atmosphere of misrule. All right? Now, watch what he says. He says, even if they knew that no one would believe they were actual Native Americans. Well, according to this, he said what? Large number of crania, eastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island, was proto-Negroid, unexpectedly. And he said it couldn't be denied. So now it makes more sense why they put on blackface to pretend to be Massachusetts Indians, right? So-called. And also, when you go to the facts of the encyclopedia, word and phrase origin, shout out Kurameo How. The N-word, which means black, was also applied to Indians. All right? Which means there was a black presence among the so-called Indians. When used by a white person to describe a black or African-American person. Latin, niger, black. The N-word has also been an offensive derogatory term applied to Indians as well as blacks up until recent times. Okay? As a matter of fact, even on the Etymology Online website, the word nig or the N-word, it is noted in the 1879 British book Colonial Household Management as the term is often applied to Indian natives. All right, and the word nig goes back to the word black. The word niger is Latin for the word black. And the word niger is also in the Bible. Read Acts, the 13th chapter and the first verse, I believe. Let me get that for y'all, actually. Let me do that real quick, because I did not include that. Sloppy of me. 1 second. Acts 13:1 KJV. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, damn it. Well, just like always, it just freezes randomly. This is what we're going to do. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. It's frozen, man. I can't. What do you want me to do? Come on, man. Okay, finally. Acts 13:1. Let's see what it says. I think it's Acts 13:1, right? How many times I quoted this? Yeah, there we go. Thank you for your patience. Come on, man. Let me copy it. Man, the internet is super slow right now. Thank you. Holy. All right. Anyway, going back, like I said, the N word was also applied to Indian natives, and the word Niger, because remember it said N word, origin, Latin, Niger, okay, which means black. Well, you go to Acts the 13th chapter in the so-called New Testament. That is actually in the Bible. The word Niger, which means black. Acts 13:1. Now, there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers as Barnabas and Simon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. So he was called Niger, meaning he had very dark skin. Let's actually click on this word. I'm going to click on this word for y'all to prove that. The scriptures say, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. Let me prove that real quick. Okay. Pull it up. Right. So they call Simon Niger. Simon, by the way, is a Hebrew name. I went over that before. But Niger equals black. It was a surname of the prophet Simon. Latin origin, black, Niger. All right. Prophet Simon. All right. Let me see if it, is there like a dictionary? I remember there was a dictionary where it says he was probably called that because of his dark complexion, his black complexion. Let's see. Let me go to the, is there a dictionary I can go to? Give me 1 second. And by the way, it's not even pronounced Niger. It's pronounced the N word. All right, when you click on the Strong's concordance. Yeah, here we go. But let me prove that it's not pronounced Niger. It's actually pronounced the N word first. Computer was super slow. But anyway, Niger is really Niger, right? Latin origin, black, Niger, right? Now watch this. Easton Bible Dictionary, Niger, black, a surname of Simon. He was probably so called from his dark complexion. Okay? So that's plain. But anyway, back to the Boston situation, right? Boston Seaport, they put on blackface. And the Wampanoag tribe is a Boston Indian tribe. Now, on Britannica, this is a picture of the Wampanoag tribe. You see how dark complexion he is? So it makes sense why they put on blackface. And these Wampanoag tribe people are disputed membership because of their complexion, funnily enough. Alright. There's also a picture of title, Recens Edita Totius Novi Belgi in American Septentrionally Side. I can't pronounce all that. But basically, this is a map. You see the dark-skinned peoples paying tribute to the pseudo-Europeans, the so-called white man, because they're not even originally from Europe. I've done videos on that too. And I'm talked more on this in the Blackface Boston Tea Party video I did 5 months ago. But anyway, reading on. Page 441. Sorry for that delay, man. Computer was just super slow. But anyway. Where are we at? Large elements of both Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid are present, tending thus to ally them with the prehistoric people of the Coahuila Caves. The Coahuila Caves are in Mexico. All right, the Coahuila Maturi Caves are located with hunter-gatherer people from northern Mexico in pre-Hispanic times. So he says Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid. All right, mind you, Ronald B. Dixon was an anthropologist. All right, studied early societies. From the foregoing, we may perhaps venture to suggest that there was an early stratum of Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid types in the Mexican region, driven back into the arid areas of the Northeast in prehistoric times, but surviving as a minority still among the Otomi, the Tarahumare, and the Pima. Okay? See that? So there was a Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid type in the Mexican region. back in the day in prehistoric times. Reading on page 449, which states, we can, however, be confident that, as in the north, the Caspian type is far and away the most important one in the Leportian group, whereas the Platurine, the Proto-Negroid, largely outnumbers the Proto-Australoid, at least in the two most important series, those from Lago Santana in Brazil and in Ecuador. Didn't that go with that study of science we got before? So the Proto-Negroid outnumbered the Australoids in the Brazil region, Ecuador, and Logo, and so Afro-Brazilians were already present there prior to the slave trade. That's what we're learning. Okay. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, so-called black people are still the majority of Brazilians today. The Brazil census shows African Brazilians. This was 11 years ago, the Guardian article. Brazilian census shows African Brazilians in the majority for the first time. Preliminary results show 50.7% of Brazilians now define themselves as black or mixed race compared to whites. Even right here, a more recent poll in 2022, over half of the nation's 250 million inhabitants, 56%, or about 120 million, are Afro-Brazilians, making the country home to the so-called blacks. So the blacks are the majority in Brazil. But anyway, reading on. Let me read that again. Whereas the Proto-Negroid largely outnumbers the Proto-Australoid, at least in the two most important series, i.e. those from Lago Santana in Brazil and Batalico in Ecuador. Now, the presence of a strong Proto-Negroid factor among the prehistoric crania raises a particular troublesome question. As is well known, the modern population of Brazil, both Indian and white, is known to have had a considerable infusion of Negro blood in the period since the 15th century. How are we to tell, then, in the case of the living tribes, such for example as Caraya of the Brazilian highlands, when we find evidence of a strong Negroid factor, whether this element is to be regarded as aboriginal or derived from the ancient stratum of this type, or is to be traced to recent missignation with the Negroes introduced to the Portuguese settlers? So he's saying, were they mixed due to the slave trade, or were they before that, right? He says there's no way to distinguish from that. One purely theoretical criterion may be of service in such cases, namely that recent Negroid admixture might be expected to show itself in a deeper skin color, curless of hair, and other features characteristic of the modern Negro, who, as I shall try to show, may be regarded as an extreme development of the ancient Proto-Negroid type, in which these elements were less strongly marked. All right. So that's all that he had to say. Let's get a quick quote from a archaeologist by the name of Jose Maria Melgar, who wrote a book, who stated in, what most impressed me, I think the book was an indelible imprint of literacy, the Olmec and African presence in pre-Columbian America. Jose Melgar was born in or at least this was published in 1869, so he's from the 1800s. He says, what most impressed me was the Ethiopian type as it represents. I reflected upon it, and indubitably, meaning undeniable, there had been blacks in this country, and it had been during the earliest ages of the world. That head was not only important for Mexican archaeology, but also for the whole world in general. It put into evidence a fact of enormous consequence. All right, now let's get another book from an archaeologist, Guillermo Dupaix. He was born in the 1700s, born in 1746 in Belgium, died 1818 in Mexico City. All right, so let's see what this archaeologist had to say in his book, Antiquities of Mexico, Volume 6, page 185. We're going to zoom in, page 185, where he states that it is a certain fact, meaning undeniable, it is a certain fact that America had been colonized from Africa previously to the arrival of the Spaniards in that continent, since Negroes were discovered in some of its provinces by Balboa and by others. I mentioned Balboa before. Their presence in that continent in a considerable body, where they carried on perpetual hostilities with the neighboring Indian tribes, is very unsatisfactorily accounted for by the supposition of a chance shipwreck. And we may have here a remark. that whilst questions of little importance as regards the history of America are discussed at great lengths by Spanish writers, the most curious facts are often passed over in total silence. So, though this is known, it's passed over in silence, and nobody mentions the Negro presence prior to the Spaniards in the Americas. Nor is it easy to explain the motives for this reserve. Mention having been made of a colonization of America, whether accidental or not, by Negroes. It deserves to be noticed that in a Mexican painting, which once formed a part of the Historical Museum of Bortoruni, a facsimile of which is contained in the present work, and which represents the migration of the Mexicans from Aztlan, the country of their ancestors. A figure very like that of a Negro paddling a canoe occurs. The thick curly hair on the head is very remarkable, as the hair of the Indians is naturally straight, and it seems to have been the intention of the Mexican painter decidedly to indicate that peculiarity. So the so-called Mexicans of the reddish hue were documenting the Negro presence there in their paintings. A certain fact just means known for sure. Fact means what? True, obviously. And we know that the Spanish invaded Mexico around 1519. All right, around the time of 1519. So just to point out that, so meaning there were so-called black people before that. Let's go to the notes, page 291. They suppose that in time past, certain black Moors sailed thither out of Ethiopia to rob, and that by shipwreck or some other chance they were driven to those mountains. The inhabitants of Caracal live in continental war and debate with these black men. Gomara, in describing the expedition of Balboa in search of the South Sea, mentions these same blacks. All right, now let's go to Godfrey Higgins. He was a historian. He wrote a book, Anacalypsis. We're going to go to volume 2 of Anacalypsis, page 35, where he states, "It is necessary to observe here that tribes, both of Negroes and bearded men, were found in South America." So tribes of Negroes, both bearded men. Both of Negroes and bearded men were found in South America. Right? Then he also states that they deliberately hide it. My reader has only to look to the figures of the crucifixes which I have given, figure 12 and 14, and to reflect for one moment upon the admitted anxiety of the Spaniards and the popes to keep the knowledge of these things from the European world. All right, so the knowledge of Negroes and bearded men being found in South America, they deliberately keep from the modern world, or from the European world. All right, also, the Mexican language is full of Hebrew words as to be almost Hebrew. All right, why? Because there were Israelites in Mexico, duh. So yeah, they tried to hide it. The Vatican and the Spanish tried to hide it, but clearly they didn't hide it very good enough, because the truth sprang out of the earth, and I was able to find it. Now, the last book I think we'll be quoting from will be from Constantine Samuel Rafinski. I don't know how you pronounce it. You Frenchies can put it in the comments. But he was born in October 1783, and he died in 1840. He was a scholar. He was a polymath, meaning self-taught, and he knew a lot of things. He was self-educated in France, so he was a wonderkid. Another example of somebody who was a polymath is that homosexual artsy-fartsy guy, Leonardo da Vinci, who was a so-called Caucasian. And by the way, Leonardo da Vinci worked for so-called black people at that time period. But that's another video for another day. But anyway, this book that this guy wrote, it's titled The American Nations, or Outlines of Their General History, Ancient and Modern. All right, now let's see what he has to say. Now check this out. He says, "The origins and annals of the black nations and of the American nations were two subjects quite obscure and neglected, or the least known of the history of mankind. Nobody has undertaken as yet the history of the Negro nations, a labor so difficult and luckless as to be despised." All right, so people don't like touching on black history. You see that? And it makes me think of another scripture, which I'm actually about to get, which is Psalms 83. All right, what do they want to say? Take our nations out of remembrance. Psalms 83. get that. Psalms 83, verse 1 through 5, really. Which reads, this is Psalms 83, verse 1. A song or psalm of Asaph. Keep not thy silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make it to moat, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. Doesn't that sound familiar? For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against the Edom, Israelites, Moab, Hagarenes, and so on and so forth, right? But notice he said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, so they are no more being remembrance. What did Godfrey Higgins say? First of all, he said the Mexican language is full of Hebrew. Then he said that both Negroes and bearded men are found in South America, and yet the Vatican the Vatican and Spaniards try to keep the knowledge of these things from the European world. Okay, then this guy stated that the origins and annuals of black nations and the American nations were two subjects quite obscure and neglected. So they neglect the black nations. They're least known, the history of mankind. Nobody has undertaken as yet the history of Negro nations. All right, a labor so difficult and luckless to be despised. All right, once again, come, let us cut them off from being a nation. Now watch this. My memoirs on this despised race, because we are the most hated. You know, we are the most hated by everybody, and everyone's against us. But anyway, my memoirs on this despised race may perhaps furnish the basis of such history. All the histories of America are mere fragments or dreams. So what you think you know about history are mere fragments and dreams, because there's so much things that they leave out. Right now, let's go to page 32, where he states, there were formerly in America, as now, tribes of all complexions, as elsewhere, yellowish, olive, coppery, tawny, reddened, brown, incarnate, or white, and even blackened or Negro-like, tall and dwarfish men from 8 feet to 4 feet in size. All right, giants to pygmies, various frames, skulls, and features of all sorts found in the Eastern Hemisphere. All right, next part, page 57. American anthropology would teach that there were men of all sizes, features, and complexions in the hemisphere before 1492. See, before 1492. Notwithstanding the false assertions of many writers who take one nation for the whole American group. Let me highlight that. Notwithstanding the false assertions of many writers who take one nation for the whole American group. So America has been diverse. All right, there's been diversity in the American lands. The Usikas and pariahs, the Chos, the Chicans were as white as the Spaniards. 50 such tribes are found in South America, while many tribes of Choco, the Manabis, the Yoruas, etc., were as black as Negroes. All the other shades of brown, tawny, and coppery were scattered everywhere. There was not a single red man in America unless painted such. Some tribes had skinny beards. Skinny beards as the Tartars, Chinese, Berbers, other bushy beards, and he just keeps going on and on, right? Next highlighted portion. Page, 193. Where he states, this tradition preserved by Herrera, Garcia, and Carvoix indicates a colony of Negroes or men painting black from South America. They might be the black Negroes of Coracaya or Coracua, mentioned by Danglera, or some other American Negro nation, of which there are many. See, there are many Negro nations. See any account of the ancient black nations of the Americas. All right. Daniel 12:4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. The books are being opened, okay? And knowledge is being increased. And before I get out of here, I just had this little picture I wanted to get to. So this is a picture of a Mayan mural in a Natural Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Black skinned, right? See this nose? Same nose as Scottie Pippen, all right, with his 304 ex-wife. But yeah, I just wanted to get that before I got out of here, man. You know, hopefully this was an edifying lesson. Hopefully you guys learned something. Um, I barely read the comments now because there's a lot of dumb comments, but I do sometimes. I do respond to your comments videos every once in a blue moon. So if you brothers want to put more books in the comments and page numbers, please. If you had a book, please put the page number. If you had a quote, please put what it was quoted from in the comment section. I might go through and look at it at some point in time. But there you have it. Yeah, this is a history lesson on the Black Americans before slavery. With that, I say peace to the 12. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father, the Most High Yahawah, in the name of His only begotten Son, yahawashi. Yahawah is the name of the Heavenly Father, who is commonly known as God. Yahawashi is the Savior of the nation of Israel, who is commonly known as Jesus Christ. I want to say shalom, which means peace to you people that are listening and learning. You brothers doing this work in truth and sincerity. And to you elders that's been doing this thing before me, man. All right, shalom to y'all. Keep pushing out this truth, man, till kingdom come. All right, I'm going to go up and get up out of here. Gone, peace, shalom.